She thought she had already survived the worst life could throw at her. Being abandoned by love. Being betrayed by the system she trusted. Being forgotten by a world that only valued her when she was useful. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared Dr. Naomi Carter for the moment she opened her eyes in a cold, forgotten basement, and saw the man who would either become her salvation or her final mistake. Because the man standing in front of her wasn't just a stranger. He was an American Mafia boss. And he had just walked into his own brother's darkest secret. Dominic Dante Moretti was 48 years old when he finally stopped believing in love. Not because he was weak, but because life had taught him, in the cruelest ways possible, that love and men like him were never meant to coexist. To the outside world, Dante was untouchable. An American-Italian mafia boss based in Chicago, controlling underground trade routes, construction unions, and half the city's silent agreements. His name alone was enough to make powerful men lower their voices. But power was not peace. And Dante knew that better than anyone. Years ago, he had once been a different man. A husband. A father who used to come home early just to hear his daughter laugh. But that life didn't survive the truth of who he was. His marriage collapsed under betrayal, not just from enemies outside, but from secrets inside his own life. Violence, lies, and the constant shadow of danger slowly poisoned everything he tried to protect. His wife left quietly. No dramatic goodbye. Just a packed suitcase, and a daughter who would eventually grow up learning to love him only from a distance. Now, at 48, his daughter only called him on holidays. Polite. Careful. As if speaking too warmly to him might pull her into the same darkness he lived in. And Dante never blamed her for that. He accepted it. Like he accepted everything else he had lost. Dante's life had become mechanical. Mornings were meetings about shipments, territories, and disputes. Afternoons were financial negotiations disguised as legitimate business. Nights were silence. Long, heavy silence filled with papers he pretended were normal work, but were really just control mechanisms over an empire built in shadows. He no longer dreamed of happiness. He only dreamed of stability. Because stability was the closest thing a man like him could get to peace. The only person who still spoke to him like he was human was his advisor, Salvatore Ricci. A man in his 60s who had survived long enough to understand that power doesn't elevate a man. It isolates him. One night, Salvatore said something Dante never forgot. "You didn't become dangerous because of what you did, Dante. You became dangerous because you stopped needing anyone." Dante didn't respond. Because silence was the only honest answer he had left. Naomi Carter was 43 years old when she disappeared. A respected investigative journalist. Smart. Relentless. The kind of woman who could smell corruption in places most people didn't even think to look. She had spent years exposing fraud, political manipulation, and hidden financial networks tied to powerful families in Chicago. But the deeper she went, the more dangerous the truth became. Naomi wasn't naive. She knew the world punished women like her. Women who asked too many questions. Women who refused to stay silent. Women who didn't understand when to stop digging. But she had never been afraid of truth. Until the truth started digging back. Chicago was beautiful in the daylight. Glass buildings. Clean streets. Powerful corporations pretending innocence. But at night, it became something else entirely. A layered city. One world above ground. And another buried beneath it. Dante ruled the world beneath. Naomi was swallowed by it. It was supposed to be a simple inspection. One of Marco Moretti's abandoned industrial properties on the outskirts of Chicago. A transaction Dante was cleaning up, just another mess left behind by his younger brother. Marco was unpredictable. Always had been. Where Dante calculated consequences, Marco created them without thinking. Over the years, Dante had fixed many of Marco's mistakes. But nothing prepared him for this one. The building was empty. Cold. Rotting with neglect. Dante moved through it alone, footsteps echoing across broken concrete. He wasn't supposed to find anything unusual. Just paperwork problems. Just another cleanup. Until he heard it. A sound. Not loud. Not obvious. Just movement. Below him. He paused. Listened. Then followed it. The basement door was locked. Heavy. Reinforced. Not standard for an abandoned property. That was the first warning. The second was the silence behind it. Dante broke the lock and stepped inside. The air changed instantly. Cold. Damp. Heavy with time and neglect. And then he saw her. A black woman. Mid-40s. Restrained. Not collapsed. Not broken. Still sitting upright as if refusing to surrender even in silence. Her wrists were bound, but her posture wasn't defeated. Her eyes lifted slowly toward him. And what Dante saw in them stopped him completely. Not fear. Not panic. But awareness. Calculation. Survival. "Don't come closer," she said. Her voice was hoarse, but steady. Dante didn't move. Not because he was afraid of her, but because something about her voice didn't match the situation. She wasn't begging. She was assessing him. Like a threat. "My name is Dante Moretti," he said quietly. "I'm not here to hurt you." A bitter laugh escaped her lips. That's what they all say. That moment should have been simple. Rescue. Escape. Explanation. But instead, something unspoken passed between them. A recognition of two people who had both seen too much of the worst side of humanity. Dante should have called for backup. Should have left immediately. Should have treated it like any other situation in his world. But he didn't. He knelt down. Slowly. Carefully. And began to free her. Not because it was strategic. Not because it was safe. But because something inside him had already shifted. Something he didn't have a name for yet. When the restraints finally came loose, Naomi didn't fall into his arms. She moved away. Fast. Guarded. Watching him like a man she couldn't afford to trust. And Dante realized something unsettling. For the first time in years, he wasn't in control of the situation. Not fully. Not emotionally. And that was when he felt it. Not power. Not dominance. Not fear. Shame. The drive out of the city felt longer than it should have. Dante didn't speak. Naomi didn't either. She sat in the back seat of his black SUV, wrists now free, but her body still carrying the memory of restraint. Every time the car hit a bump in the road, her shoulders tightened slightly, as if expecting pain to follow. Dante noticed. He said nothing. But he adjusted his driving smoother. Slower. Controlled. And that small adjustment was the first thing she registered. Not kindness. Not trust. Just awareness. They arrived at one of Dante's private estates outside Chicago. A secluded property surrounded by bare winter trees. Quiet. Too quiet. The kind of place that didn't belong to normal life. Naomi stepped out of the car and immediately scanned everything: doors, distance, exits. Survival instincts never sleep. Dante watched her do it. And for the first time, something uncomfortable settled in his chest. She wasn't acting like someone rescued. She was acting like someone relocated. Naomi refused the guest room at first. Refused food. Refused conversation. Refused anything that resembled dependency. "I'm not staying here," she said flatly on the first night. Dante stood near the doorway. "You don't have anywhere else to go." That sentence wasn't cruel. It was factual. And that made it worse. Naomi turned away. "I've been in worse places than this." Dante didn't respond. Because he believed her. The house settled into silence again. But it wasn't peaceful silence. It was guarded silence. Two people orbiting the same space without touching it. On the third day, Naomi finally spoke to him again. You didn't ask who I am. Dante looked up from the papers in his hand. I already know. That made her pause. Slowly, she crossed her arms. That's impossible. Dante placed the file down. Dr. Naomi Carter. Investigative journalist. Missing for 9 days. Last known case, corruption tied to city infrastructure contracts. A pause. Then softer. You were close to something dangerous. Naomi studied him. Not fear this time. Interest. Suspicion. You did your homework. Dante's expression didn't change. In my world, information is survival. That line lingered between them. That evening, Naomi found him outside, standing near the edge of the property. Not talking. Just existing. Like someone carrying too many thoughts to sit inside them. She hesitated before speaking. You didn't have to bring me here. Dante didn't turn. Yes, I did. A beat. Why? Silence stretched between them. Then, quieter than before. Because you weren't supposed to be there. That answer didn't make sense. But it felt honest. And Naomi noticed that. Over the next few days, patterns formed. Naomi would wake up at night, trauma pulling her from sleep. And every time, Dante would be there. Not inside the room. Not intruding. Just sitting outside the door. Silent. Present. Like a guard who wasn't assigned. One night, she opened the door slightly. You don't have to do that, she said. Dante didn't look up. I know. Then why are you? A pause. Then honesty without decoration. Because I understand what it's like to be trapped somewhere no one comes for you. That was the first time Naomi stopped seeing him as just the man who owned the house. And started seeing something else. Something deeper. Something wounded. During the day, Dante ran his empire through calls and encrypted conversations. Violence disguised as business. Control disguised as order. Naomi observed it all quietly. Not approving. Not condemning. Just watching. Trying to understand how a man could operate so calmly inside something so dangerous. One afternoon, she finally asked, "How do you sleep at night?" Dante didn't hesitate. "I don't." That answer should have scared her. But instead, it explained him. Later that evening, Naomi collapsed into a chair in the living room. Exhaustion finally breaking through her defenses. Dante noticed immediately. "You should eat something," he said. "I'm not hungry." "You haven't eaten properly in 2 days." Naomi looked up sharply. "I didn't ask you to monitor me." A pause. Then Dante quietly. No. But I'm still responsible for what happens to you here. That sentence hit differently. Not ownership. Responsibility. Naomi studied him longer this time. You talk like a man used to carrying consequences. Dante met her gaze. I am. Something shifted between them. Not attraction. Not romance. But recognition. Two people shaped by damage. Standing too close to it again. That night, Naomi finally broke a little. You ever lose someone and realize you don't know how to get them back? Dante didn't answer immediately. Because the question didn't feel casual. It felt personal. Finally. Yes. Naomi looked at him. Who? A long silence. Then. My family. That was all he said. But it was enough. And for the first time, Naomi didn't see a mafia boss. She saw a man who had also been left behind. That night, neither of them slept fully. But the silence between them changed. Less hostile. More uncertain. Like something fragile had started forming in a place neither of them had planned. Before we continue, if stories about second chances, emotional healing, and unexpected love mean something to you, take a moment to like this video and subscribe. It helps bring these emotional stories to more people who need them. Now, let's continue. Do you believe it's possible to trust someone again after surviving betrayal, or does some damage change you forever? By the second week, the estate no longer felt like a prison. But it didn't feel like freedom either. It felt like suspension. Like time had paused around Dante Moretti and Dr. Naomi Carter, waiting to see what they would become when forced to exist in the same silence long enough. Naomi moved through the house more freely now. Not relaxed. Never relaxed. But no longer frozen. Dante noticed the change immediately. Small things. She stopped checking every corner before entering a room. She started sleeping longer. She even ate without being asked. But trust still wasn't there. Only survival adapting to a new environment. Dante began changing in ways he didn't announce. He still took calls. Still managed his empire. Still spoke in controlled, quiet authority. But something subtle shifted. He stopped leaving the estate for long stretches. He stopped sending others to check on Naomi. And he started being present. Not watching her. Not controlling her. Just being there. Even he didn't fully understand why. One evening, Naomi found him in the study. He was reading documents, but not really focusing. She leaned against the doorway. You always this quiet? Dante didn't look up. Only when I'm thinking too much. Naomi crossed her arms. That sounds dangerous for someone like you. That made him glance at her. Someone like me. Naomi didn't hesitate. A man who controls dangerous things for a living. A pause. Then Dante calmly. I don't control them. I manage them. Naomi tilted her head. That's a softer word for the same violence. Silence. Then Dante, quieter. Maybe. That honesty surprised her. Later that night, the estate lost power briefly due to a winter storm. The house went dark. Only candlelight remained. Naomi stood near the window, watching the snow fall. Dante entered the room with a flashlight. You okay? He asked. She didn't turn. I've been through worse than darkness. That line hung in the air longer than expected. Dante stepped closer. Darkness isn't always the worst part. Naomi finally looked at him. What is? Dante hesitated. Realizing no one is coming to find you. That silence between them changed something again. After that night, their interaction shifted. Not dramatically. Not romantically. But emotionally. Naomi began asking questions about him. Not his business. Not his power. But him. Did you always live like this? Did you ever want something different? Dante never gave full answers. But he never shut her down either. And that was new. One afternoon, Salvatore Ricci arrived unexpectedly. His expression was not calm. Dante, he said quietly, we need to talk alone. Naomi noticed immediately. Something had changed. When Dante stepped outside, Salvatore lowered his voice. The council is asking questions. Dante didn't respond. Salvatore continued. They want to know why you're keeping her alive. A beat. That woman is a liability. Dante's jaw tightened slightly. She's not involved. Salvatore looked at him carefully. In our world, innocence doesn't matter. Exposure does. That sentence lingered. That night, Dante became quieter than usual. Naomi noticed immediately. You're distracted, she said. I'm fine. You're not fine. You're never fine when you say that. Dante looked at her. Long pause. Then, there are people who think you shouldn't be here. Naomi didn't react immediately. Then softly. And what do you think? That question landed differently. Dante didn't answer right away. Because the truth was becoming dangerous. I think, Dante finally said, that you're safer if you leave. Naomi froze slightly. Is that your way of telling me I'm a problem now? No. Then what is it? A pause. Then Dante, quieter. It's me protecting what I shouldn't be protecting. That was the first time Naomi saw fear in him. Not fear of enemies. Fear of attachment. After that conversation, Naomi pulled back. Not dramatically, but emotionally. Less conversation. Less eye contact. More silence. Dante noticed. And didn't fix it. Because he didn't know how. That night, Naomi sat alone in her room. Thinking. Not just about escape. But about him. A man who had freed her, yet still belonged to a world that could erase her at any moment. And worse, a man who didn't seem capable of choosing between duty and emotion without breaking himself in the process. If someone saved your life, but their world still put you in danger, would you stay, or leave before you get too attached? Because now, everything is about to change. Not slowly. Not gently. But in a way that neither of them will be able to undo. The storm arrived without warning. Not just outside the estate, but inside Dante Moretti's world. It started with a single phone call. Short. Urgent. Unforgiving. Dante answered in the study, his expression tightening within seconds. Naomi, passing by the hallway, immediately felt the shift in the air. Something had changed. Something dangerous. Dante didn't see her watching as he spoke. But his voice dropped low. Cold. Controlled. Who authorized this? A pause. Then his entire posture went still. That was the moment Naomi understood. This wasn't business anymore. It was war. Salvatore Ricci arrived 20 minutes later. No warning. No delay. And the look on his face said everything before he even spoke. They moved without you, Salvatore said. Dante's jaw tightened. Who? A long pause. Then the answer that changed everything. Marco. Naomi, standing in the hallway, froze. She had heard that name before. His brother. The unstable one. The one Dante had always cleaned up after. But Salvatore wasn't finished. He's not just acting out anymore. He's building against you. Dante didn't move. Didn't blink. But something inside him shifted. Quietly. Dangerously. Later that night, Naomi found documents left open in the study. She didn't mean to look. But she did. And what she saw changed everything she thought she understood. Her case file. Her investigation. Financial routes. Offshore accounts. Political connections. All circling back to one source. Marco Moretti. And worse. Dante's organization had known about her before she was taken. Her breath caught. "No," she whispered. The realization wasn't just betrayal. It was structure. She wasn't randomly taken. She had been flagged, targeted, contained. Footsteps behind her. Dante. He stopped when he saw the file in her hands. And for the first time, he didn't speak immediately. That silence said everything. Naomi turned slowly. Her voice was controlled, but shaking underneath. "You knew." Dante didn't deny it. A mistake. A risk. A liability. The words hung between them without being spoken. Naomi stepped back slightly. "So I wasn't rescued." Her eyes hardened. "I was managed." That hit harder than she expected. Dante finally spoke. "You were never meant to be hurt." Naomi laughed bitterly. "But I was taken anyway." Silence. Then, "By my own brother," Dante said quietly. That was the moment everything fractured. Not loudly. Not dramatically. But permanently. Naomi backed away. "I don't know what's worse," she said, voice tight, "that you're part of this world, or that I started trusting someone who is." Dante stepped forward slightly. "Naomi." "No." She shook her head. "Don't." Her voice cracked, but she refused to break completely. "You don't get to use my name like that anymore." And for the first time, Dante didn't follow her. He just stood there. As she walked away, the house changed after that night. Silence returned, but heavier. Not peaceful. Not safe. Just empty. Naomi stayed in her room. Dante stayed in his study. Two people in the same space. Now separated by truth. That night, Dante didn't sleep. He sat alone, staring at documents he no longer saw. Because his mind wasn't on power. Or territory. Or betrayal. It was on her face. The moment she looked at him differently. Like he had become someone else. Someone she no longer recognized. And for the first time in years, Dante Moretti felt something close to fear. Not of death. Not of enemies. But of losing the only person who had ever made him feel human. Naomi sat by the window in her room. Snow falling again outside. Beautiful. Cold. Unforgiving. She whispered to herself, "I should have known better." But even as she said it, her voice didn't fully believe it. Because the memories didn't match the truth she was now seeing. The nights he stayed outside her door. The way he never touched her without permission. The way he looked at her like she mattered. None of it felt fake. And that made it worse. The next morning, Salvatore confronted Dante. "She's going to leave," he said. Dante didn't respond. Salvatore continued. "And if she does, she becomes a risk." A pause. Then the implication. "You know what that means." Dante's expression darkened. For a moment, it looked like the old world was about to win. But then, he stood up. Slowly. Firmly. And said something that changed everything. "No." Salvatore blinked. Dante repeated it. "She's not a risk." A pause. "She's not a problem." His voice lowered. "She's not something to eliminate. Beat. She stays safe. No matter what." That decision wasn't strategic. It wasn't political. It wasn't safe. It was personal. And Dante knew it. That evening, Dante went to Naomi's door. He didn't knock immediately. Just stood there. For a long time. Then finally, he knocked. Naomi opened it cautiously. Their eyes met. No warmth. No trust. Only distance. "I'm not asking you to forgive me," Dante said quietly. Naomi didn't respond. "I just need you to know," he continued. A pause. Then honesty, raw and unfiltered. "I didn't know how to protect you without pulling you into my world." Silence. Naomi's voice came softer now. "Then maybe you shouldn't have tried." That landed hard. Dante nodded slightly. "I understand if you leave." A pause. Then, "But I needed you to hear the truth before you decide." And for the first time, Naomi didn't shut the door. She just looked at him. Not as a mafia boss. Not as a rescuer. But as a man standing at the edge of losing something he never expected to find. If someone hurt you by omission, not intention, but still changed your life, could you forgive them? Before we move to the final part, don't forget to like and subscribe if this story is resonating with you. Because what comes next is not just a decision. It's a reckoning. And whether they break apart or finally choose each other will change everything. Naomi Carter did not sleep that night. Not because she was afraid, but because for the first time since her capture, she was no longer confused about what hurt more. The basement, or the truth she had just discovered. Morning light spilled through the curtains of the estate, soft and indifferent, as if the world outside had no idea two people inside it were falling apart in completely different ways. Naomi stood by the window for a long time, watching the snow melt into thin streams against glass. Thinking. Not about escape. but about Dante Moretti. And that was what frightened her the most. Across the estate, Dante sat alone in his study. No calls. No meetings. No empire. Just silence. Salvatore had tried to speak to him earlier. Dante had stopped him with a single sentence. If I lose her because I didn't choose differently, then I deserve to lose everything. That was not the voice of a mafia boss. That was the voice of a man who had finally stopped hiding behind power. He stood slowly, walked toward Naomi's room. Not as a ruler, not as protection, but as someone about to risk everything without a guarantee of survival. Naomi opened the door before he knocked. As if she already knew. As if her heart had been listening for him all morning. They stood there. Silent. No guards. No distance. No interruptions. Just truth. Dante spoke first. I'm not asking you to stay because you need me. A pause. Then softer. I'm asking you to stay because I finally understand what I've been missing my entire life. Naomi didn't respond immediately. Her voice, when it came, was steady but fragile underneath. And what is that? Dante met her eyes. You. The silence that followed was different this time. Not empty. Heavy. Meaningful. Naomi looked away. You built your life on control, she said quietly. And I was just another thing that slipped into it. Dante shook his head immediately. No. A step closer, but careful. You were the first thing I couldn't control and still didn't want to lose. That landed differently. Because it wasn't possession. It was admission. Naomi's voice cracked slightly. You don't understand what it means to trust someone after being buried alive by people who said they cared. Dante nodded slowly. I don't. A pause. But I want to learn. That was the moment everything shifted. Not instantly. Not magically. But humanly. Naomi studied him for a long time. Searching. Not for lies. But for certainty. And found neither. Only honesty. Raw. Imperfect. Real. Finally, she whispered. If I stay? I need truth. Not protection. Not control. Dante didn't hesitate. You'll have both. Naomi shook her head. No. A pause. I'll only stay if I'm allowed to leave. That sentence changed him. Because it wasn't fear. It was freedom. Dante exhaled slowly. Then nodded. You will always be allowed to leave. Naomi didn't respond immediately. But she didn't walk away either. Instead, she did something neither of them expected. She sat down. Right there. In the doorway between distance and closeness. Dante didn't move. He just lowered himself onto the step opposite her. For the first time, they weren't standing against each other. They were just sitting. Two broken lives. No masks. No control. No roles. Weeks turned into months. The estate no longer felt like a prison. But it also wasn't a fairy tale. It was something slower. More fragile. More real. Naomi rebuilt herself first. Therapy. Work reconnecting with journalism, this time on her terms. Learning that survival wasn't the same as living. Dante changed too. Not dramatically, but consistently. He stepped back from certain parts of his empire. Not abandoning it, but refusing to let it define him completely anymore. For the first time in decades, he learned to exist outside control. They didn't call it love at first. Neither of them were ready for that word. Instead, it began in smaller truths. Shared meals. Quiet conversations. Arguments that ended in understanding instead of distance. Moments where Naomi would catch Dante watching her, not possessively, but carefully, like she mattered more than survival. One evening, she finally said it. "You're still dangerous." Dante nodded. "I know." A pause. Then she added softly, "But you're not dangerous to me anymore." That was the beginning of everything. 1 year later. Chicago winter again. But different this time. Warmer in ways weather couldn't explain. Dante stood outside the estate. No guards nearby. Just him. Waiting. Naomi walked out slowly. No hesitation. No fear. Just choice. "I'm leaving tomorrow for a story assignment," she said. Dante nodded. "I know." A pause. She studied him. "You're not coming with me." Dante smiled slightly. "No." Another pause. Then, "But I'll be here when you come back." Naomi stepped closer. "You're sure?" Dante met her eyes. "For the first time in my life." A breath. "Yes." And then she did something simple. She reached for his hand. Not as surrender. Not as dependency. But as equal ground. Months later. A quiet ceremony. No spectacle. No empire. Just close friends. Family. Healing. Naomi Carter stood in simple ivory. Not as someone rescued, but as someone who chose again. Dante Moretti watched her, not as a man who owned anything, but as a man who finally understood what it meant to belong without control. And when she walked toward him, he didn't reach first. He waited. Because this time, love wasn't about taking. It was about choosing. Some people don't find love early. Some find it after loss, after damage, after becoming someone they thought no one could love again. But sometimes, that's exactly when love becomes real enough to stay. Not because it is perfect, but because it is chosen again and again. Stories like this remind us that love doesn't always begin in softness. Sometimes it begins in brokenness. And healing is not about forgetting the past, but finding someone who stays while you rebuild from it. If this story touched you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful emotional romance stories. And tell me, if love came back into your life after everything you've been through, would you have the courage to choose it again? Thank you for watching. And don't miss the next story waiting for you.